Next CEO is Brad George, who is from Orosur Mining, a South American focused gold and development company.
Okay, thanks, Zach, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm somewhat conscious that I gave a presentation just over a week ago when we announced some drill results, but the day after we also announced a new joint venture in Brazil. So it's probably worthwhile having another chat just to explain what we're doing, where we are, and where we're going. Usual disclaimers. The company, I think, this is where the complications come in, has been through a major transition over the last 12 months. When I joined the company, when Louis and I joined the company last year, it really was in quite a grim position. We had a share price of less than 2p, no money in the bank, and it really was looking rather grim. We've since, we think, turned that around. We've now got a healthy cash balance. We've got a major project in Ansar, which is showing signs of being a potentially world-class region. And we've just recently announced a new project in Brazil. So we certainly have turned the company around, and we hope there's quite a buoyant future. The usual snapshot. The share price is what it is. We've obviously come off the highs of about 40p, but having said that, we were sub 2p not that long ago. So we were a 20 bagger, now it's a 10 bagger. So I do apologise for that. The key takeaways here, I guess, are we have quite a small shareholding base, 188 million shares, and we have about $6 million cash in the bank with some more coming in. So we're in a reasonably strong position, but still, I think, for what we've got asset-wise, quite undervalued. Jumping then to the Ansar project in Colombia, some nice pictures. Obviously, it's a lovely country, but it's for an old bugger like me, it's going to be hard work. The technicals, we've got a land base there of a bit over 200 square kilometres, most of which is granted, but there's two major tenements that need to be granted. They've been applications for some years now. We do want to move those through to granted status, but that's quite a protracted process. There's been no conversions of applications in the last 12 months in Colombia due to COVID. And while that's just beginning now, there's a very long backlog. So I can't give any guidance on how long that will be, but I would suspect early next year at the very earliest. So we are working hard, but it's not beyond our control. I will jump between Ansar and Aptar from time to time, Ansar being the name of the project, Aptar being the name of the major gold project smack in the middle, upon which we've done all the work. We've done almost no work on the other 20 kilometres of strike of the major structures. So it's a large area, but it's almost entirely untouched. We have a joint venture with two of the world's 10 largest gold miners, Newmont and Agnico. It's a rather complicated JV, so I've restructured the slide to make it slightly easier to understand. It runs over 12 years, over which time those two companies must spend 30 million in the ground and pay 4 million in cash to Orosur. We're currently coming toward the end of year 3, so where we stand there, the anniversary date being September the 6th. That process, should they go all the way to completion, gives them a route to a 75% holding, and then we hold there. Perhaps the other main point to make is that should they then proceed at the end of next year, there would be an additional $2 million cash payment to Orosur upon conversion to the joint venture in September, October next year. Geologically, I won't bog too much. We're on the Mid-Cauca belt west of Medellin. It's a very interesting area where we have some quite significant gold and base metal projects up and down strike. We have mafic volcanics to the east, felsic volcanics to the west. We have a felsic intrusive here, which we think might be the source of all the minerals along this belt. The key point being is this central zone here, which is the Aragon Fault zone, where we're having tuffs and mineralized breccias. So this is the major zone, a few hundred meters wide and roughly 20 kilometers from south to north, which is the main structural conduit for mineralization and the main host. So this is our major focus, but there are other prospects out here, but this is the main key. I've shown this slide previously, and I'll keep showing it a few more times. The project isn't new. We acquired the project in late 2014 when we acquired Canadian company Waymar Resources. They had previously drilled 18,000 metres, which is quite a lot, you would think. And some of the results were quite spectacular. But when we go back and look at most of that drilling, most was in the wrong direction. They drilled from the west toward the east, which effectively was down strike, down dip. So that's provided some very juicy intersections, which historically are on our website and previous announcements. But while that gave us some guidance as to where the gold was, that drilling was almost entirely useless in terms of understanding the geology, and certainly less than useless when it comes to interpreting a geological resource. So it was very encouraging in knowing where to go, but we had to, in effect, really go back and begin from scratch and re-drill everything from the other direction to understand the continuity from hole to hole. So we began that process November last year, and we've just come in now toward the end of that first field program, and we've had quite significant success not only in getting intersections, but also understanding the controls now for mineralisation. We began drilling, as I said, in November last year. We've now released since then 19 holes, or the result of 19 holes. We're currently on MAP 95, which is the last hole of that planned 9,500 metre drill program. We've now reduced from 5 rigs back to 1 rig to complete that process. This is a snapshot on the right of the key results from the 19 holes produced to date, and there are quite clearly some very juicy numbers here. The key takeaways are 70 metres at 3.5 grams, 21 at 6, 23 at 17, 59 at 9.5, 61 at 2.05. These are about as good as they come, which is very good for us. Although I have to confess that we've been doing it now on a fairly regular basis to the point now where it's kind of expected. So it's quite a tough act to follow. We also have very high base metals. We're having very high zinc. We have short hits of over 30% zinc, the occasional plus 4 or 5% lead, and a couple of percent copper. That's interesting, and it certainly, we think, in the future will give us some financial benefits when it comes to mining, but that isn't the main game. Gold is predominantly what this project is about. We've now, with the end of that drilling program, getting now a better understanding of the geology, and what we're seeing is not only is it controlled by the Aragon fault, and we see here the Aragon fault, a nice curve. We always like seeing curves and faults, but we're seeing that the mineralisation is concentrated in these thick plunging shoots. The entire fault is mineralised at a low tenor, but every now and then we see this blowing out to very, very thick, very high grade plunging shoots, and this is economically where all the gold is going to be. When you start getting those sort of numbers of 50 metres plus at 10 grams, you don't need a lot of volume to get a lot of ounces. So this is giving us now an understanding of what's going on geologically, and importantly, it's changing our focus on how we explore going forward. So rather than just drilling along the fault on a regular basis, we're now targeting these major shoots because these are going to be the key. I will point out, this image here is a bit out of date. We are drilling some holes here in this gap, and we'll infill the model here in coming weeks. The question that I get asked is given the numbers, or given the assays that we've got, which are quite spectacular, why aren't we moving this now toward a 43-101 resource? Well, why are we effectively slowing things down when we should perhaps in theory be speeding things up? And the answer to the question pretty well, it depends on who you ask. If this was just an Orosur project, then yes, we probably would be just drilling this Aptar prospect to a resource. We see here we've got a nice little resource model for the northern half. The southern half we haven't done yet with outstanding results. So we'll know reasonably quickly internally what we've got here as a preliminary number in tonnes and grade, but we can't divulge that because it won't be 43-101 or JORC compliant. That's purely an internal number. To go to resource compliance is quite a long, drawn out and rather expensive process. We would quite easily spend another 18 months, probably $7 or $8 million moving this toward a compliant resource. And that's something that would probably be a great value for Orosur, but not a great value for Agnico and Newmont. These two companies are sitting upon resource bases of, I guess, combined 140 plus million ounces. So a couple of million ounces here is not of any value to them. So their view is that the drilling done to date really has proven that this is significant and quite real. That proves that this is potentially a very major gold system. So what they want to do now is to leave Aptar sitting here quietly, chugging with one rig, expanding quietly, but moving further along strike up and down to potentially discover more of these things. This decision also, to a large extent, stems from the problem we've had since the beginning of this year with delays in getting assays out of the lab in Peru, most of which is COVID related, to the point where it's now taking us twice as long to get assays as it takes to drill the hole, which is just not sustainable. Every hole we drill, we're falling further and further behind. And when we're chasing these high-grade shoots, we simply have to wait until the assays come in to retarget the next hole. So the decision to wind back was based upon two things. One, upon the very different priorities of these major companies, but also the need to target these shoots more accurately, and that requires assays. I will make the point that the major 10 million ounce project to the north of us, Politica, has well over 300,000 metres of drilling. We've done less than a tenth of that, so we really only have begun the process here. So stepping out to the region, I point out again the Aptar prospect where we've been drilling is this little piece in the middle. The other 20 kilometres is to a large extent untouched. The Aragon fault is becoming better defined now as we do more mapping, and we've been mapping here in the northeastern tenement now for the last couple of months. Somewhat subject to wet season. We're coming out of the season now, so it was quite a wet one. So getting up here now is going to accelerate moving forward. We've created some new prospects. The Pepino and Pepas projects are showing quite significant potential in terms of what we're seeing in the field. We've collected assays, soil samples, stream sediment samples, and leg samples all over the region. We've also worked over the applications here into the south with the sampling, and those assays are in the lab now and will come back in coming weeks and will guide our exploration. The prospects here at Jesuitas, to my mind, is potentially very exciting along this boundary here, but these applications are probably next year. So as much as I want to get in there, I can't until they're granted. There's also an area down here, which is yet unnamed, where Anglo Gold had done some work about 10 years ago with some very interesting soil samples. So again, we need to get in there and do some work in coming weeks. The area here is very interesting, but most of these areas here are a mix of farming land, and therefore negotiating access with the landowners is a very key part of timing. So we've been mapping over the last couple of months, and we'll do so more now that the drilling is wound back to a degree and we've freed up our geologists. It is quite difficult terrain, so it's certainly no country for old men. So we have a young team and very fit, and they're doing some amazing work, particularly in the middle of a COVID pandemic. The process, however, does require a formal notification or negotiation with landowners, getting access, and as we can see in the sort of bottom left here, it's been rather interesting and exciting. If you like this kind of thing, fording rivers and running down mountains. So difficult terrain, but we're seeing some very positive results. I think the key point is, because we know what the major structure is, and we're able to map to a reasonably accurate degree where that structure goes from the terrain and the valleys, we can focus our work. And once we get out there, we're highly encouraged that we are finding the right sorts of rocks exactly where we expect to find them. We're finding quartz veins that are mineralized. We're finding sulfides, pyrite, chalcopyrite, sphalerite, and we're finding gold-bearing veins in exactly the right position. So while this is obviously early stage, the fact that we are seeing the right things in the right place gives us great encouragement that the entire fault is to a large degree mineralized, and we need to now focus down on the areas that are going to be key for drilling. So when the assays come back in coming weeks, we're getting back in here with geophysics and drill rigs and and working quite hard from end of this year onwards. So Aptar's, or the Ansar project, is in a very nice position. It's moved from being entirely unknown a year ago, then introducing Agnico to the joint venture in October. Suddenly things began to get very busy. We've now proven that the Aptar prospect is potentially a very, very, I wouldn't say world-class, but probably close to it. Very thick in sections, very high grade. That proves that the whole system is very heavily mineralized. We reach a point in terms of the joint venture where Agnico and Newmont need to exercise their option to move into year 4. That's September the 6th and 7th. We don't know the answer to that, but I would be very surprised if they don't move forward. We continue with one rig at Aptar to just slowly increase the size of that prospect over the next 12 to 18 months, following those high-grade shoots we talked about. Once we get a better understanding and the assays from the lab become a little bit more regular, we might move in more rigs there, we'll see. We'll continue mapping along the strike of the Aragon Fault. That's showing up good results. We have IP surveys along the entire length of the fault beginning in the next couple of weeks. That will give us direct drill targets with a view that we will then begin drilling as quickly as we can post rollover into year 4. So we're looking at probably October, we hope we can get drilling again on a large scale way along the strike. And the applications, as I said, we want to move those forward to granted status, but that's somewhat beyond our control. I guess the key point is that this is now showing the signs of being a very high quality, potentially world-class prospect, which means we're in here now for the long haul. We've had a very, very good first almost 12 months. We're going to be here for years, I hope, moving this forward to something quite exciting. Which then I guess begs the question of, if Aptar is so exciting, then why are we moving into new prospects in Brazil, which is a question we do get asked. We certainly had some comments from investors of why don't we sit back and let Aptar run, which I guess to the degree we can, but we've taken a view as a board that we need to be examining new prospects for a number of reasons. One reason is because we can. The Ansar project is fully funded by 2 major companies, so that's costing us nothing. We have a free ride there. So we have a very strong balance sheet, 6 million in the bank. We have possibly more cash coming in from other sources. We have probably a couple of million more coming in if warrant holds exercise. And as I noted, the Ansar joint venture, should the major companies move forward next year, would see a $2 million cash payment to us at the end of next year. So we have a strong sheet, so we can look at new prospects. And then the usual arguments, we can diversify geographically, geologically, and look at more commodities to reduce our risk and reduce the degree to which we are seen as a one commodity, one project, one country company. More news flow, of course. New projects give us options to do things in future years if they move them forward. I think a key point is that the mining sector needs more exploration at a slightly earlier stage, which is something that the market around the world has difficulty funding, particularly for junior companies. But because we do have a very advanced, very high quality project, perhaps we're at a point where we have some flexibility to examine projects other companies may not be able to do. Now this may smack somewhat of being a project generation model, which is not necessarily intentional, it's just where we think at the moment we can add the most value. The other point, of course, is that new projects are great, but you've got to choose the right project and do it well. It's a lot harder than it sounds. The caveats are there are no bargains out there. There are no good projects waiting around to be picked up. Everything that's half decent is either held or requires a very high price. So our criteria are, we're not going to go crazy and blow the bank balance on some new project. We're going to work within the capacity of our existing and hopefully future balance sheet. And we certainly at this point have no immediate plans for any capital raisings. The other point is that there are lots of projects out there that have been around the blocks half a dozen times. They're interesting. Every day we see projects that have mineralization, but they're just not quite there. They're a bit deep or the grade's a bit low. They've been worked over 5 times in the past, and the 6th time, to be fair, is not going to change things. So we're not interested in just repeating what's been done 5 times in the past. We have no desire to follow trends. The world already has 100 lithium companies. They don't need 101. We'd like to be somewhat exceptional and off to the side. We've looked at a number of projects over the last 2 years, and we feel that, at least at the moment, our best ability to add value is looking at projects at a bit earlier stage. Not grassroots, but green to brownish fields, areas, large lease holdings in key areas with existing operating mines, key mineralisation indicators, the right land in the right location. But equally importantly, we want to make sure we come in at the right cost. We want to come in with almost zero, effectively zero entry cost and very low holding cost. And we want to work in areas where we already have worked in the past. And the rationale, I guess, is that by coming in at a very low cost, then we can add value very quickly. If you start paying millions of dollars for projects, you have to really work hard to add value. But by coming into large areas at a low cost, you really can start from a low base. Which brings us to the Avocados project in Western Brazil. It's not yet signed, we're still at the LOI stage, but we're on very friendly terms. I know that the CEO very well, we have a long history together. We've by and large agreed most of the terms that give us the ability to move to 75% at a very low cost. So we will move that forward to a JV over the next couple of weeks. The choice of tin is a bit of an odd one. It's a very old metal, of course, but it's, at least in my view, it's the unknown, the unloved of the energy metals, but possibly with my view, the best fundamentals. Largely in the point of view that the demand is going to increase significantly as the major use of tin is in solder, but the supply side is very fragile. Most of the supply coming out of either China or coming out of rather old and getting a bit tired alluvial deposits in Southeast Asia, significantly Myanmar, which obviously has political issues. So very, very tight supply constraints, but a burgeoning demand side, to the point where the price has doubled over the last 12 months to be now at about $33,000 a tonne. What attracted me to the area, among many things, is that it's a very large producing area with major mines in the district, and it's a very, very large piece of land. We're looking at a land holding of almost 3,000 square kilometres, which is really what you want to do to maximise your chances of success. We see many projects at 10 square kilometres, and that's useless. But with thousands of kilometres, we have significant potential to really have some fun. It's also an area that's been largely unexplored. There's been some discoveries made decades ago artisanally, but since then almost no modern exploration. So we're coming into what we think is quite a virgin country. And Brazil is a country where I have experience, Louis Castro, our chairman, has experience, and some of our geological staff have experience. So it's not new to us. There are no surprises for us. We know how to work there. We have all the contacts, and we can get on the ground running quite quickly and very low cost. I guess the appeal is the Bombfatura mine was discovered in the 80s by artisanals, and since then has produced over 200,000 tonnes of tin, with some of the smaller surrounding mines produced in total of 300,000 tonnes. So it's a very high producing area that historically has largely been run by family-owned or artisanal companies. So it's seen almost no investment by foreign publicly owned companies, apart from Meridian, who will be our joint venture partner. So it's, we hope to be the first international company to come into the region, and we're doing so with a very, very large strategic land holding, which gives us a clear advantage. We have large databases of drilling, of sampling, modern airborne geophysics done by the government, interpretations. In the last year or so, the government of Brazil has made a major push to advance this region with some regional studies. So it is early stage, but it's an early stage with very significant showings and major production. So it's not green fields, it's sort of greenish, brownish, but I think we've got ourselves, with the help of Meridian, a major footprint in what we think is a key area. So I guess it comes to where that leaves us as a company. As I said, we've not only changed the company from an old production company, went through a very low patch last year. We've moved it forward from June last year into the holder of a bankroll, potentially world-class gold project in Colombia. Uruguay history is slowly being wound up and is pretty close now to being removed from the balance sheet. We have a very strong cash balance with more coming in, with no need for further dilution. We hope we've got, and that will come to the next few weeks, a major new exploration project in Brazil. We have a few other projects that are in negotiation now, and they may or may not come to fruition in the coming weeks. We are dual listed, which is, I'm not sure if it's a good thing, but it's what it is. But at least it gives us access to the Canadian and North American and the UK markets, although the North American side needs to be reinvigorated. But I think that the key point is we want to make the company as simple as possible. I think too many companies focus on complex structures, on promotion, on spin. We want to bring this down back to bare bones, just basic assets, and run the assets hard, and keep the company as simple and as easy to understand as possible, and to add value in the best, cheapest and fastest way that we can. So it sounds easy in theory, slightly harder to do in practice, but we think we've got a good team, and we think, the bones now of a quite exciting future. So I thank you for your time.
Hello again, and I'm now joined by Brad George, who's CEO at Orosur Mining. How are you today, Brad?
I'm well, thanks, Zach. And yourself?
Doing fine. This is the first one of these I've done at Box Market, so what can possibly go wrong? I've started off with the most pertinent questions possibly first, so we can get them out of the way. First is, what is happening with the shares put into a fund to pay for the closing of operations in Uruguay? Who's holding them, and when are they likely to be activated?
Okay, so we're referring to a package of 10 million shares that were issued to a trustee in Uruguay as part of the creditors agreement in 2019. So that's a touch over 5%. That's obviously a significant overhang, and I can understand the reasons for the question. Those are held by a trustee. We have no control over what happens to those, but the trustee has the remit to sell those shares at their discretion to use the proceeds to pay down creditors in Uruguay. They are active. We understand the trustee has been active in the market for the last 3 months selling those shares, but we have no information on how many or when they'll be wound up. So I am hoping, and I have an expectation that we may be near the end, but I'll be the last to know, and we'll pass it on to the market. But I'm hoping that we are fairly close. Okay.
With the potential new tin project, do we have enough funding for planned work programs?
Absolutely. That deal and other deals we're working on, as I made the point in the presentation, they have zero entry cost and very low holding costs for the first few years. We're very conscious of our balance sheet. We're very protective of the balance sheet. You know, we think we have more money coming in from warrants and from Newmont payments, but those aren't guaranteed. So that deal and other deals are absolutely within the current cash balance, and we have no immediate plans for any capital raisings.
Right. Speaking of tin, your shares fell when you announced the Mexican tin deal. Can you put people's minds to rest, as there seem to be some doubts regarding the update on the bulletin boards, the font of all knowledge, obviously?
Yeah, the font of knowledge. Yeah. Look, I understand it came a bit out of the blue, and there's always a question of why you do these things. I talked about some of those reasons in the presentation, but what I will say the reason wasn't is that we don't fear that APTA or Ansar is failing. In fact, quite the reverse. You know, I think the Ansar project has now basically succeeded in that there is a deposit at APTA. The question now is how big. So that answers the question of yes and no, yes or no, and now we're moving into size. So that significantly, in my mind, de-risks that project, and therefore we can step back and take a bit of a breather and look where else to go. But we take into account the balance sheet issues and other issues, and we think that looking at new projects is the most efficient way for us to make use of our balance sheet and our skill set, and our other costs like listing costs and other costs that are part of being public. We can leverage those and pick up assets that we can add value. So it's I think, to my mind, it's because we had de-risked Ansar that we now have flexibility to move on.
Maybe you answered part of that, the next question, but the question is, we're hoping for an extension of the JV on Ansar. Obviously, you can't promise anything, but do you think the grades and other aspects of the program have been good enough for it to move to the next stage?
Look, I think the answer is yes, but I don't speak for Newmont and Agnico. Certainly, APTA has basically hit the target that they required. What we're waiting on now, and there are more drill holes going on, but they won't really add to that decision. What Agnico and Newmont are waiting on now is the results from the more regional sampling, the soil sampling, the bleak sampling, to give them a sense of the regional potential. So yes, APTA is a success in terms of showing the mineralization. Now they want to get just a bit of a taste of the regional potential, and that should be coming in the next couple of weeks.
Would we need a separate license permit for our new prospects, Pepas and Pepino, or is it currently progressing under the application along with?
Pepas and Pepino are on a granted license, so that's fine. We have to go through the usual land access agreements and water permits, but that northeastern license has been granted for some years, so we are free to work there.
Right, and I think that's sort of got most of the questions out of the way, but the Guatemala situation, how far are we in resolving land access on that?
Yeah, it's a slight piece of string question. As you know, farmers all over the world can be prickly. They are in Australia, they are in Colombia, I'm sure they are in the UK. So even though in Colombia and most countries, mining has precedence. So if it came to a push and a fight, mining would be allowed to go above and beyond the farmers, but we never want to go to that point. We want to have the farmers on our side. So that's been a long discussion, mostly COVID related. These farmers, you know, they don't want us running around their land in the middle of a pandemic, and I understand that. So we go slowly, we talk to these guys, we assuage their fears, and we explain things. And I think we're now seeing COVID begin to roll over in Colombia. So the discussions on Guatemala have been going well the last few weeks, and I would hope, fingers crossed, touch wood, that we'll have those permits to work there in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, just a final question from the viewers, listeners. As part of a package, San Gregorio's creditors, the company issued shares which will be put into a trust fund. When are they likely to be activated?
Well, that's the repeat of the previous question. Yeah. Those are those 10 million shares. So yes, they're not activated, they were shares. The trustee can sell those shares as he or she sees fit. And as I commented before, we think that they have been actively being sold over the last few months, but we don't get the numbers. We work under Canadian rules, and any shareholding under 10% is not disclosable. So we don't get told as that number goes down. So the first we'll know is when we're told they're all gone. So
right.
I'm hoping that'll be sooner rather than later.
All right, and just one of my own. Your company has been mixed, well, sort of mentioned in the same dulcet tones as Greatland Gold, and there was sort of excitement due to that sort of reflected glory, perhaps. But is that a fair comparison? And do you, as CEO of your company, believe that you could do, you know, something pretty good in your own right?
I think it's a fair comparison. When that happened end of last year, obviously our joint ventures are very similar, a major party, the same kind of numbers, the same number of years. So that all made sense. But they're probably 2 years ahead in terms of drilling. So yes, the comparison's fair, but I think you know, the market perhaps enthusiastically gave us a valuation before we'd done the work, which was, you know, very flattering, but rather sort of expectations that were hard to meet, and then reality came in with a big stick, and here we are. So yeah, I think that was fair, but possibly premature. But I think we're now, with a couple of phases of drilling results, getting to the point where, you know, it now maybe makes a little bit more sense. But I think the market caps are still a couple more zeros in the back of theirs, so there's a long way to go yet.
Well, we'll see what we can do with those extra zeros. Brad, George, CEO at Orosur Mining, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, always a pleasure.